Hello everyone, welcome to English with Shalini, and in this video we are going to discuss the short story The Last Lesson written by Alphonse Daudet. Alphonse Daudet was a French novelist and short story writer. What was the background of the story? There was war between Prussia and France. It was between 1870 to 1871, and in that war, Prussia defeated France. And what was Prussia? Prussia was modern Germany plus Poland plus some parts of Austria. So they combined, and they called Prussia. This is the symbol of Prussia. So they defeated France and they captured two districts of France, that is Alsace and Lorraine. And there they imposed their language, that from now onwards only German language will be taught in the French schools. It is about the realizing the value of freedom we generally take for granted. So this lesson is based on the experience of a school and a schoolmaster and its children, and it tells about the what is the value of freedom and how we take freedom for granted, how we take our language for granted. And the school teacher M. Hamel makes his last lesson memorable with strong words and gestures invoking patriotism in all present at the premises. So the schoolmaster is M. Hamel, and he is appealing to his children that he is giving his last lesson, and they uh, must observe this lesson very carefully. Now, summary. The narrator of the story is Franz. So this story is a story of a school and a district, and the narrator is a Franz. Franz is a little boy, and he is a student in the class of M. Hamel. One morning, Franz was late for school, and as usual, he was late for school. And his teacher M. Hamel had told his class that he would be asking questions on participles on that day. So he was very afraid that what he would do when he will go to school, because he has not learned his lessons of participle. Franz felt like bunking school for a moment for that, but he resisted the urge and went to school. So somehow he resisted that he will not bunk the school and he will go to school anyhow. On his way to school, he saw people gathered in front of the bulletin board, and as usual he assumed that there was some bad news, because there was war going on between France and Prussia, and the bulletin board was full of the bad news, especially for the France. So he ignored that and he moved about to move to his school, and it had been happening since Prussia annexed their district of Alsace. So France is living in the district of Alsace, which is now under the control of Germans, means Prussians. And the day felt unusual compared to the regular days. So somehow Franz felt that this is not the usual day. This day is different and situation is different, I think, as there was no commotion in the classroom. So when he went to the school, he heard no voice coming out of the school. Earlier there was a great hustle and bustle coming from the school. So he thought, what's the day? It is not Sunday, but how things are looking like a Sunday. Everything was quiet, and instead of being scolded by M. Hamel, Franz was asked to go to his seat quickly. So he noticed something odd about his teacher M. Hamel, and was not wearing his unusual clothes. He wore extravagant clothes only meant for the school inspection or prize days. So he observed that his teacher is wearing some extravagant clothes, and he was thinking, what's the reason? The Franz was thinking all about. Another odd thing that day about the school was that most of the villagers, including the former mayor, former postmaster, etc., were sitting on the back benches and looked sad. So this was a very unusual sight for France, because apart from children, former mayor and former postmaster were sitting in the class. So he was wondering what's the reason why they are sitting here. As the class began, the teacher M. Hamel announced that this was his last French lesson. He was a French teacher, he was a history teacher, and for his students, as the Prussians had announced that French would no longer be taught in school, since the district of Alsace was under the control of Germans, means Prussians. So they ordered that the French would no longer be taught in that schools. Instead of French, German language will be taught there in Alsace. So the M. Hamel, the teacher, sadly disclosed this news that now German language will be taught to them, and Franz felt a sudden pang of remorse for that because he thought that he never learned his language, that is French language. He never cared for that, but he doesn't know much about French language, and he want to learn that to the core. He realized what the bad news on the bulletin board was. French was no longer to be taught in schools. Franz felt sorry about bunking his classes and not bothering about his lessons. Suddenly, he is thinking that why I have not cared for my language, why have I have not cared for my country. He realized the villagers had come there to pay their respect to M. Hamel's 40 years of service as a teacher. So, M. Hamel was teaching French there for 40 years, and villagers have come to pay their respect for the teacher. So, they came there. Now the Franz started joining all the dots that what is the reason for the crowd before the bulletin board, what is the reason for the villagers to be sitting in the class, what is the reason for extravagant dress of M. Hamel and all that. So reason was that now Germans will control this district of Alsace, and their language will be taught in the schools. So it was also about showing respect for their country, which was not there anymore. Now this country is not there anymore. Now that country, that district will be under control of Germans, and it will be called Germany. So when it was France's turn to recite, so that day M. Hamel taught very well. He wanted to teach people and the students French very well, and he taught very well. Then there was a writing session, and then he asked students to recite their lessons. And when it was the turn for the France, M. Hamel was patient because France was never able to recite his lessons, especially of French language. So he did not scold France as France has anticipated that he will get a scolding from M. Hamel. He went on to discuss their district's problem, the assumptions that they always had plenty of time. That is how the students lagged in their lessons because they had taken their freedom and time for granted. So instead of scolding France, he told this is not the problem of your France, this is the problem of the whole district of Alsace. Alsace district has always postponed his work to the next day and never cared for their country and freedom and their French language. Then M. Hamel blamed himself and Franz's parents for making him do course rather than letting him focus on his studies. So M. Hamel went on to talk about the beauty of French language, their mother tongue, and how everyone should hold on it even if they were not taught at the schools. So now French will no longer will be taught in the schools, but it can live in your soul. It can live in your mind. So you must take care of your language, and you must preserve your language because language is the key for success. It is a great strength. Any language is a great strength, especially mother tongue. M. Hamel says that when you are enslaved, this is the key. Language is your key for getting away from that slavery, that's enslavement and slavery. So the only key to redeeming their freedom and getting freedom back is the common language, the mother tongue that they share. He had brought new copies for students that day and he decorated the classroom for them. Franz felt that everything his teacher was teaching was lucid, easy to understand, and very easy. So he blamed himself for not listening to the lessons properly earlier. Earlier, he never paid attention to his language and lessons. Franz discovered that M. Hamel was supposed to leave the country tomorrow, and he realized how difficult it must have been for his teacher to leave a place he had stayed and served in for 40 years. As the clock struck 12 and the Prussians blew his trumpets, the class ended, and M. Hamel said goodbye to his class by writing Viva la France on the blackboard since he was too emotional to speak. So he wrote that M. Hamel wrote Viva la France means long live France in the blackboard, and then he was not able to speak because of choking in his throat because of emotions, and he leaned his head against the wall and made a gesture with his hands implying that schools was dismissed and they can go. So what is the conclusion of the last lesson? The story ends on a very sentimental note. On one hand, the citizens of Alzeg district were disappointed about losing their freedom under the reign of Prussians, that Germans, but also on the other hand, they had come to realize that they were going to miss the freedom and the privilege of learning their language, that their French language, they're going to miss their French language, both of which they had taken for granted. They have taken for granted their freedom, they have taken for granted their language. The last lesson shows how the teacher's departure inspires patriotism in the students and villages at the end of the story. We can see how the citizens of Alzec are getting ready for a new tomorrow of bitter realities by showing exceptional mental resolve. So they are now resolved to face the challenges of the future. Now discussing about the some question answers. Who is the writer of the last lesson? The writer for the last lesson is a French novelist and short story writer Alphonse Daudet. Now, what is the central theme of last lesson? The last lesson gives us a moral that we should not take our freedom or any other thing we have for free or for granted in a granted manner, because we never know when we might be deprived of those privileges of freedom for language and all those things. We should respect our language and our freedom. Why does M. Hamel talk about continuing to learn the French language? M. Hamel emphasizes continuing to learn the French language, even if it is not taught at schools, because knowing a language is like finding a key to freedom for people enslaved by foreign entity. So that is the thing. And thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you.